Through practice, this lets me and me are not getting along. Hey yo, and welcome back to my channel where I talk about writer things, parent things, and writer-parent things. Today, I'm going to talk about short stories and how to write them. Which, full disclaimer, this is just based on my understanding, my method, and my experiences with writing short stories. Other people may have different opinions or different ways to go about it, and that's perfectly fine. So, onward to the video. Oh, almost forgot. If you want to see samples of my short stories so you kind of know if I know what I'm talking about or if I'm talking out my ass, you can find them on my website, SamanthaNasset.com. So first, what is a short story? Well, the name is actually pretty self-explanatory. It's a story told in far fewer words than a novella or a novel. What qualifies as a short story? Wikipedia tells me stories below 7,500 until we get into flash fiction territory, which a flash fiction is the only story shorter than a short story. When I participated in contest, the longest flash fiction I've ever really seen was around 1,000 words. So I'm gonna say that a flash fiction is a story that's 1,000 words or shorter. Thus, for the purposes of my video, I'm going to say short stories are any stories between 1,000 to 7,500 words. There's a few reasons to write short stories, with of course the number one being that you just enjoy writing them. Enjoy being able to weave a tale in such a small span of pages. A few other reasons are as follows. There's a much smaller time commitment to writing a short story. They're really good practice for being able to write a beginning, middle, and ending. And because they are shorter and that smaller time commitment, we can write more of them faster than we could an entire novel. Critiquing them also takes less time, and then it helps us more easily identify a lot of different issues, such as pacing, overwriting, underwriting, foreshadowing, narrative voice, setting the scene, setting the tone, just like a lot of different things. Plus experimentation and experience. Most of my short stories are admittedly in genres that I'm not actually familiar with or comfortable writing, such as crime capers. But that's okay, because I can research the genre and try it out and gain that experience through writing the short stories and then get better at it without committing to an entire novel that takes months and months to write and then just realizing I have no idea what I'm doing and getting very discouraged. I would rather gain the experience to at least be decent at writing a new genre through 20 short stories than writing 20 novels doing that. With all of that being said, writing a short story is not actually identical to writing a novel. So I'm going to share how I plan mine out and a little bit of the differences. Once again, I want to emphasize this is based on my experience, my understanding, and people will give me pretty positive responses to my short stories, but this may not help everybody. I find in short stories, plot and characters are much more important than the world building, so that's where most of the focus should be on. This isn't to say that the world is not important, because setting is always important. However, we need to be more concise with how we convey the setting. For example, if we're writing a 2,000-word short story and we use 1,000 of those words to describe the store the character is shopping in, that's half of our allotted word count. One example of setting the scene in a few words is as follows. The fluorescent lights burned their sensitive eyes, but the cool air conditioning was a welcomed relief from the blistering heat outside. Only 21 words into our story, and we've already established that the weather is hot. Our MC is moving from outside to inside an air-conditioned and well-lit building, and that their eyes are sensitive. Why are they sensitive? Maybe our MC is a vampire, or has a migraine. Options. And of course, there are going to be people who disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. Different styles exist, but this is my video, so they can go make their own. One of the first things I decide is my length limit. Now, this is not necessary, especially if you're not writing in a contest with limit rules, but I find that it's really nice to have a general idea of how long I want my story to be. For short stories, I use a bullet point outline, which is essentially just opening scene, point A, point B, climax, the wind down. Since I already know how long I want my short story to be, let's just say 3,000 for this example, I know that around 2,000 words is when I want my climax to happen. This gives me a third of the story to write the climax and then do the wind down. Through practice, I gain the experience and knowledge of my own writing limits and style. It helps me learn and pre-plan about how long my opening scenes are, how long it should take me to get to plot point A and plot point B, so I can identify the weaknesses and strengths in my pacing. Again, this can be flexible though, because not all opening scenes are going to need to be about the same length, and not all wind downs are going to need to be the same length. This gives me the experience to learn to identify when I'm going to need more time on a plot point than another one. Which, speaking of pacing in a short story can be tricky. Pacing in general can be tricky. With a short story, you should never want things to move like really slow, but we also don't want things to go too fast or readers might not know what's going on. Now, while learning, I feel that pacing is one of the harder things to learn and identify while writing or while critiquing individual chapters, just because you don't have the full picture quite yet, which makes short stories much more convenient for learning and honing that skill because they are smaller, and so the pacing issues are easier to identify, and that skill definitely can translate to novels. Plus, the more we do it, the more we identify it, the more we train our brains to identify it while we are writing. And of course, pacing in a novel is going to be different than pacing in a short story, but still, it's just a skill. Just like a novel, short stories need a wind down, which is the time after the climax to essentially bring your story to a close. Unlike a novel, short stories do not actually need to answer all of the questions that came up during the story. Now, the big thing here is because novels are such a time commitment, if we leave readers with unanswered questions and there's no sequel or anything, a lot of times that can leave them very disappointed or salty or upset, because justifiably so. They spent hours, maybe days or weeks reading this book and then they don't get all the answers. Some readers are okay with that. I personally hate open-ended novels. However, short stories are a little different because they are not as big of a time commitment. And through the nature of them, a lot of times they just do leave unanswered questions, which is fine. Because a short story is more just a snapshot into the characters' lives, just a brief glimpse through usually less than a day or so. It is still imperative that the short story wrap up its current plot and answer the very important questions that it put forth. For example, if I'm writing a short story about two characters from very different walks of life who decide to open a bakery up together, a good ending could be the opening day of the bakery, with maybe some hints that one or both of the characters are supernatural in some way, such as being a shapeshifter or being a witch. But I don't have to actually confirm that they are supernatural. I do, however, have to cement whether or not the bakery opens. Firstly, before accepting a critique partner for a short story or flash fiction, make sure that they are familiar with short story formats or are at least willing to learn how to critique a short story. It's just going to make everything easier later on. For beta readers, it's a little tricky because not all beta readers actually realize or recognize that there is a difference in telling a story through a shorter format and a longer format. And even if they do, they may just naturally have a preference for a longer format, and that shows in their feedback responses. Just like sorting feedback for a novel though, we need to look for patterns of 3 and make sure that what we want to convey is understood by the readers. I do personally believe the rule of 3 is a little more flexible with short stories just because you may get a surplus of beta readers who are unfamiliar with short story format, but just be very careful that it's not ego saying, oh, well, they just don't understand short stories. it's a learning process and definitely something that can only really be explained through experience. But hey, like I said before, we can get a lot more experience with short stories in a shorter amount of time, so plus side. Do we need a professional edit for a short story? Well, that kind of depends. If we're making a collection of short stories to sell, definitely. If we're planning on selling our short stories individually through an online retailer, definitely. Anytime we plan on making money from our writing, I believe a professional edit should be utilized. Planning on featuring them on a website or a blog, that's a little more flexible. I don't actually think it's necessary then. However, I do hire editors for all of the short stories and flash fictions that I put up on my website because, for me, this may be the first writing that my readers are exposed to or that potential readers are exposed to, and I want my A game on display. Alright everybody, that's all I got for you today. Do you write short stories? Do you write flash fiction? Do you enjoy them? Do you not enjoy them? Let me know in the comments down below. I host live streams on Mondays at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. We alternate between doing write-ins where we do writing sprints and chit-chat on our breaks, and Let's Talks where me and a guest talk about a topic that may have to do with writing or may not have to do with writing, but it's always a good time. Remember folks, if you'd like to see samples of my writings through flash fiction and short stories, I do post them for free on my website right here, SamanthaLNasset.com. Or if stalking my social media is just your thing, that's cool too. It's at Samantha L. Nasset on Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr, and Facebook. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and maybe subscribe and ring-a-ding that bell. I see a third of you watching these videos are unsubbed. Just join the family. Come on. And with that, I make videos every Wednesday. And with that, Sam out. Do, 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 do. Again on my phone. What? Fuck it, my hair's different, so it's fine. The line down. Yeah, the lie down. That's the most important part of our short story. Do you write shories? Shories. We all write shories. I don't know what I'm doing with my hands, we're just going with it. And Let's Talks, where me and a ghost. Stop.